All right, so today we are diving headfirst into a story of just incredible, almost unbelievable ambition. It's really a fever dream of gold, and it leads to the spectacular, absolute ruin of one of England's most famous figures, Sir Walter Raleigh. Seriously, this is a tale about a man who chased a ghost, a golden phantom, and paid for it, not just with his own life, but with the life of his son. So let's just start with Raleigh's own words, because they tell you everything you need to know about the man's ambition. He says, "The shining glory of this conquest will eclipse all those so far extended beams of the Spanish nation." I mean, wow. For him, this wasn't just about getting rich. No, no, no. This was about national glory, about ego. You have to remember, at this time, England is kind of the up-and-comer, right? They're watching with total envy as these massive Spanish galleons, just loaded down with gold and silver from the Americas, sail back to Europe. Spain was the global superpower. And Raleigh, well, Raleigh believed that one single spectacular discovery could totally reshape the world order. It would put England right at the center of everything. This quote, it just perfectly captures the colossal, almost insane scale of what he was thinking. So who was this guy, Sir Walter Raleigh? Well, before he became this doomed adventurer, you have to picture him as the ultimate Renaissance man. He was witty, he was handsome, a celebrated poet, and, most importantly, a massive favorite in the court of Queen Elizabeth I. We're talking about a man of action and incredible influence, someone who really seemed destined for greatness. But here's the thing you gotta understand about men like Raleigh back then. Exploration wasn't some kind of fun hobby. It was a high-stakes, all-or-nothing path to power, to royal favor, and, of course, to wealth beyond your wildest dreams. And this was the object of his obsession, the mythical city of Manoa. You've probably heard of it by its Spanish name, El Dorado, the Golden One. I mean, the very name sends a shiver down your spine, right? The legend whispered of an empire so incredibly rich that it was literally made of gold, and it was hidden somewhere deep within the impenetrable, terrifying jungles of South America. For a man like Raleigh, finding Manoa wasn't just a cool idea. It wasn't just a possibility. In his mind, it became his absolute destiny. Now, what's so fascinating, and kind of tragic, is how Raleigh actually built this whole vision in his head. See, it wasn't based on a single thing he actually saw with his own two eyes. Not a bit of it. It was all built on stories he gathered, second-hand, third-hand accounts from Spanish writers, tales from indigenous peoples. He just desperately wanted to believe it. You could even say he needed to believe it. See, he'd really messed up. He'd angered the queen with a secret marriage and had totally fallen from favor. So this quest, this was his grand, desperate gamble to win back his spot at the top and secure his legacy forever. He wove all these random tales into an undeniable, unbreakable truth inside his own mind. Okay, so let's just look at the picture he was painting for everyone back in England. I mean, this is the sales pitch, right? He starts relaying these stories he heard from a Spanish writer, describing these unbelievable treasures that he was now 100% convinced were sitting there in Manoa. And the vision he sells, it starts right here. Get this. Hollow statues of gold which seemed giants. So we're not just talking about statues. We're talking about giant, hollow statues made of pure, solid gold. Just imagine that for a second. And, the delusion just keeps growing from there. It gets even wilder. In his vision of Manoa, gold wasn't just for decoration. It wasn't special. It was common. So common, in fact, that it was stacked up like firewood. Just heaps of billets of gold that seemed wood marked out to burn. Can you even picture that? Simple blocks of solid gold just sitting there, waiting to be used like logs. The sheer abundance he's describing here is just staggering, and it was absolutely designed to ignite the greed and imagination of an entire country. And this right here is the absolute peak of the fantasy, the crown jewel of his delusion, a garden of pleasure, where everything, the herbs, the flowers, even the trees, was perfectly, exquisitely crafted from gold and silver. I mean, think about that. This wasn't just a city with a lot of gold. No, this was a world literally made of gold. It was a vision of heaven on earth. And Raleigh, he had completely convinced himself and was trying to convince everyone else that he and only he held the map.
But that magnificent, shining dream of El Dorado, it was a world away from the grim, filthy, brutal truth of the expedition itself. It turns out the path to a golden paradise led directly through hell.
And you don't just have to take my word for how awful it was. Raleigh tells us himself.
He describes his boats as being crammed with men, wet clothes, rotting food, all of it just baking under the suffocating jungle sun. And listen to this. He, a man who was used to the absolute luxury of the royal court, says this: "There was never any prison in England that could be found more unsavory and loathsome, especially to myself." He's comparing it to the worst, most disgusting prison he can think of. And yet, even as he was suffering through this nightmare, the dream of Manoa, that golden city, it just kept him going. You know, the jungle wasn't just a physical challenge. It was a psychological one. It messes with your head. And the deeper Raleigh and his men went, the more the lines between reality and myth just started to blur. He began reporting not just what he saw, but what he was told. And it didn't matter how absolutely fantastic or unbelievable it was. And this is probably the most bizarre, most out there claim in his entire account. I mean, get ready for this. Headless men. I'm not kidding. He reports with a completely straight face on a tribe of warriors called the Iwaipanoma. And he says they have their eyes in their shoulders and their mouths in the middle of their breasts. It is just a stunning moment of delusion. He's taking local legends and passing them off as fact, as if he's some kind of anthropologist. Maybe he just believed that this new world was a place where the normal rules of nature simply didn't apply. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's a wild story he told around the campfire. But no, this wasn't some tall tale. Raleigh published this account. He presented it to the English court as part of his official chronicle of the expedition. He was staking his entire reputation, everything he had, on the existence of these creatures. He was literally presenting fantasy as military intelligence to the crown. And to try and back up this absolutely incredible claim, Raleigh even found a witness. Or so he thought. He brought the son of a local chief all the way back to England with him, and this young man supposedly confirmed the whole thing. He apparently called them the most mighty men of all the land. Now for Raleigh, this was all the proof he needed. Case closed. But for us, looking back, it just looks like a really desperate man hearing exactly what he wants to hear. So, where does all this lead? This golden delusion, this obsessive quest that was fueled by secondhand stories and reports of monsters? Well, it would ultimately cost Sir Walter Raleigh absolutely everything. So let's get to the bottom line. After all that hardship, after all the searching, after the reports of monsters, how much gold did Raleigh's 1595 expedition actually find? The answer is a big, fat zero. Nothing. Not a single golden statue. Not one billet of gold that looked like firewood. Not one single ounce from the mythical city of Manoa. The dream was completely and totally empty. But here's the thing about a true believer. Failure isn't the end. It just makes them try harder. You'd think that would be it, right? But Raleigh's obsession just festered. For over a decade, in fact, while he was imprisoned in the Tower of London on completely unrelated treason charges. But even from his cell, he eventually persuaded a new king, James I, to give him one last shot. He sold it as this can't-miss opportunity for a king who is always short on cash. Just one last chance to prove that El Dorado was real. Honestly, this final voyage was just doomed from the start. England and Spain were actually at peace now, and King James gave Raleigh one explicit ironclad order: whatever you do, do not mess with the Spanish. But Raleigh himself was too old and too ill to lead the party upriver, so his men, desperate to find any kind of treasure, they just ignored the king's command. They attacked the small Spanish settlement of St. Thome because they believed it was blocking their path to Manoa. So, you have to picture the scene. Raleigh is waiting back on the ship, he's sick, and word of the battle finally makes its way back to him, delivered by an indigenous witness. And the news was just grim. Yes, they had taken the town, but the Spanish governor was killed, 2 Spanish captains were killed, and the cost was heavy on their side too. 2 English captains were also slain. The whole mission was a complete diplomatic and military catastrophe. And one of those slain English captains was Walter Raleigh. Not Sir Raleigh. His son, also named Walter. This is the ultimate heartbreaking tragedy. The dream of El Dorado didn't just cost Raleigh his reputation or his fortune, it cost him his own son, who was killed leading that disastrous charge. The quest for a city of gold had finally claimed its ultimate price. And after that, the collapse was just rapid and tragic. It all fell apart. When Raleigh sailed back to England completely empty-handed, having defied the king and enraged the Spanish, well, there was no mercy waiting for him. The Spanish ambassador basically demanded his head to preserve the fragile peace. And King James, to avoid a war he really couldn't afford, just reinstated Raleigh's old, dormant charge of treason. And just like that, the great courtier, the poet, the explorer, was sent to the executioner's block. So in the end, Sir Walter Raleigh found no gold. He found no empire. All he found was ruin. And it leaves us with this really fascinating question, doesn't it? How should we remember this guy? Was he a bold visionary who dreamed of expanding England's glory across the world? Or was he just a deluded man chasing a phantom, a deadly mirage that ended up consuming him, his son, and his entire legacy?